The reason I didn't make a video on Invincible Season 2's food of my own volition was threefold. For one thing, I just didn't notice it as much. I think I only noticed it the first time because I showed the first season to a lot of people, including several friends and my significant other at the time. This meant I was watching and rewatching that season, which led to me picking up the small things a lot more. I didn't have that experience with Season 2, so I assumed there was less to notice. For another, I felt that the food analysis I did previously was still spot on. I agree with almost every point I made in that video, even though I missed a few pivotal meals that I wish I'd included. I'd talk more about that, but then I wouldn't have a reason to plug my Patreon at the beginning of this video, which contains a short vlog I recorded talking about what I missed shortly after the first one was uploaded. You can watch it for $1 if you're interested, link in the description. Anyway, I didn't think there was a lot more to dig up. I expected that the writers of the show would remain consistent in their symbolism, and even if they didn't, an audience to that video would be well equipped to do their own analysis at home. I thought I'd be depriving people of one of my favorite pastimes if I tore Invincible Season 2 apart for them. That ignores that there are different people who maybe don't want to do the work of recording every single meal and deconstructing it frame by frame. But I'm self-centered enough at this point for ignoring things like that to be second nature. And the third was because I just didn't want to do it. Like, I had other projects planned, and I'm still going to be doing those, and the longer they take, the less relevant they become, and unless something really bad happens, I guess, which I hope it doesn't, and look, it's just a lot, okay? But the people have spoken, and this is officially my job for the time being, and the first one was one of my favorite videos, even while I was making it. Plus, I should be able to work on 2 videos at once. Shouldn't be that hard. Good news, there's a ton of food in Invincible Season 2 that doesn't really fit the bill I wrote for the first season. A lot of it still does, which should speed things up, but well, for example, the first season didn't exactly have enough instances of the word lunch for it to earn its own category. Season 2 does, and it's kind of a code word for genuine meal. That whole thing I said in the first video about none of the main characters getting much time to connect, Season 2 fixes that, believe it or not. It's still plenty fucked up about it. Nolan rushes Mark in the alternate dimension because he missed lunch over a riot in Bangkok. Over 100 people need to die quickly because their murderers are starving. But that's also connection. A connection between Nolan and Mark. A real one. Just a mention of it, but this is the father-son meal our Nolan always wanted. This is the bleakest use of this category, but it's ample justification for its theme. Mark takes Amber to lunch during the summer and flies her off to Las Vegas. They don't actually eat together though. Mark doesn't have the time. He barely even has the time to bring her back to work before he leaves. We're gonna talk a lot more about these two, by the way, and I hope it pisses off everyone it pissed off the first time. This scene shows that Mark is trying, really trying to make this relationship work. He's not coming up with excuses. He tells Amber exactly what's going on and why, and she's understanding about it. She's patient and kind and just wants to make sure he's taking care of himself while saving the world. It's heartwarming and encouraging and foreshadowing. We'll get there. A better lunch between significant others can be found much later in the show when Robot interrupts Monster Girl making a sandwich. This is after several times when Rudy talks about Amanda's curse like it's all there is to her. He seems to bring it up not just every time they talk, but every time she's in the same room. It's all he can ever seem to think about when she's around.
And that's a problem.
I think the closest parallel to this is disability. Monster Girl's curse is a legitimate problem she has to deal with daily, and she's mature enough to recognize that. But the fact that she has to deal with it daily means it's oppressive to constantly think about it. Directing your focus to other things is important for anyone with a physical or mental disability, just as important as taking care of yourself and receiving proper treatment. If you let your disability take over your life, then you will not have a life. Which is a problem when the people closest to you constantly express worry about your disability, because then it feels like that's all they ever see in you. I have OCD, but OCD is not everything that I am. Monster Girl gets younger every time she transforms, but that's not the only thing that matters to her. For a long while, it seems to be the only thing that matters to Rudy, and that understandably hurts Amanda. So this lunch is Rudy's attempt to apologize, and it's a pretty damn good one. They get to have a real heart-to-heart where she can explain all of this to him, and he can make a real attempt to change and grow as a person. By the end, when Amanda hands him half of her sandwich, it's a sign that she's willing to share some of her life with him. It's pretty cute. And I'd like to keep talking about lunch, but another issue with discussing the food in Season 2 is that it's harder to categorize. There's more drinks than just alcohol, coffee, and water. There's more meals than just lunch and dinner. There's more food than the ones we eat. And all those instances of food still weave together in this cacophonous mess the same way the plot does, and I mean that in the most positive way I can say it. But that makes analyzing the show a little harder. Some of these meals are directly linked to ones in a different category or that don't even have one. Like Eve's parents. Based on my definition of a meal, Eve coming home to check on her mom, filling their fridge with food, and creating a fruit bowl is a meal. It's an act of generosity and a very blatant one, but it's also one she's forcing onto them. The food is meant as an olive branch, but it's treated like a threat. The whole dynamic between Eve and her parents is really complex, actually. On the surface, it's just the fantastic versus the mundane. Eve can provide almost literally magic solutions to every problem, but her father doesn't trust them because he doesn't believe in getting something from nothing. And to play devil's advocate, he's kind of right. Even if he were to accept this food, he would feel indebted to Eve, his own daughter. There are a lot of people who will abuse that. It's the same reason Debbie donates the book money. She doesn't want to feel indebted to Cecil. In Adam's case, he doesn't support the person his daughter is becoming or the things she's doing, and if she does those things to help them, that puts more guilt in his life. He's also wrong, though, for a lot of reasons. For one thing, just because Eve could misuse her parents' gratitude doesn't mean that she will. Adam can't trust his own daughter, and that's a problem he needs to fix. For another, this all carries hints of several other dynamics that are all rooted in toxic masculinity. He's the man of the house. He's supposed to be the one bringing the bread home. He's supposed to earn his keep, and he expects his daughter to do the same. She's a woman. She should be at home with a husband, having and taking care of her kids. Parent versus child, man versus woman, realism versus optimism. There's a lot more to this argument than just no superpowers. I like the realism versus optimism take a lot, actually. The idea that you can't trust a freebie, that there's always a cost for everything, is burned into us as we age. But it's also untrue. There are people out there who just want to help because it feels good to help. They already receive a benefit by doing right by others, and that's a profound sense of self-satisfaction they can't get by doing anything else. They don't need or want a return on that investment because they already got it. That kind of altruism is lacking in Adam's worldview, and it's what Eve's based her whole life around. So when she comes back to the house to find that everything she gave them was thrown in the trash, it's basically her father saying everything she believes in is worthless. He calls her food and her gold fake because he doesn't believe anything that materializes out of thin air could ever be real. When Eve contradicts him, he tells her about Chicago, about the lot she built on, and how people could have been hurt. This is a cogent point against blind optimism. Eve sees a problem and immediately works to correct it, which would be great if she always knew exactly what she was doing, but no person has that power, not even Eve. And being able to do spectacular things has the potential for more spectacular fuck-ups as a result. She's young, and she makes mistakes, but those mistakes have more dire consequences than they would for an ordinary woman of the same age. That's a lot for her to handle, so she goes looking for someone who understands her predicament. Unfortunately, Mark is off helping Thraxel when she goes looking for him, so she finds William and Amber, who invite her out to brunch the next day. Yeah, you see why I had trouble categorizing this shit? I'm counting this one as lunch, because there's no shown breakfast in this season, and the one other time we get a mention of it, it's pretty damn important. Which means when Eve toys with Kill Cannon and a couple gets injured because of it, her leaving Amber on red is a decision to seclude herself from her friends. This is a common reaction in stressful situations. You don't want to trouble anyone else with your problems, and you're also not sure they would even understand. So you withdraw into yourself, regressing to a previous state of post-trauma life because that's easier to understand than what you're going through now. That's what Eve's doing when she starts staying with her parents again. Like curling into a ball and waiting for things to be okay, which isn't a solution, but it's what she needs in the moment. The next time we see her, she's having dinner with her parents and walking past them watching TV. Based on previous scenes, we can recognize this drink in Adam's hand as beer, which adds another category to Eve's situation. Though alcohol in this season is a whole thing unto itself, so we'll keep the camera on Eve. Eve's parents eat at the dinner, but Eve herself doesn't. She sits down with them, but moves her plate to where she doesn't even have to look at them. We cut from her barely touching her food to washing dishes after the meal. She's living under their roof, but still can't seem to bond with them. She walks right past them watching TV, ignores her father's pointed grunt, and heads straight to her room, where Rex is waiting to help her get back on her feet. We see here that the show still doesn't like using meals traditionally, as Eve and Rex, being friendly with each other, has no mention of food at all. He's really here to help her, and also to ask for her help saving the world, and that means he has no need to feign connection through lunch or dinner. Meanwhile, Debbie's trying to figure out what the hell Oliver can actually eat, a minor hiccup in learning how to take care of him. Meals as a connection in Invincible are a really fascinating dissection of the usual manner in which the trope works. The Maulers talk with Pete regarding the terrible food they're getting is a good example. Pete's stubborn as a mule this time, and understandably so. Rather than try to placate him, the Maulers threaten the man. Can I just say, this one sucks. Not on a writing level, but emotionally. Hearing Mauler X genuinely apologize before knocking Pete out in Season 1 was kinda heartwarming. But now to see effectively the same guys using that against him is shitty in the extreme.
It reminds us that these guys are not good people, which is a nice touch. Just as many dinners and lunches in this season show the disconnect between characters as they do the connections between them. It's a return to form on how meals work in most fiction, and it's used phenomenally well. If you're planning to do screenwriting, I'd say these are some of the meals you should look at for examples of the right way to do it. Well, these and a few others, but we're not ready yet.
Which reminds me, I got a few comments on the last video saying the reason characters don't eat a lot of food in the show is because of the extra cost in animating them eating. Which got me wondering if there was a sizable cost to animating a character eating food in comparison to stuff like just walking and lip flap. So I went to r/animation to get some opinions on the matter from people who've actually done it. General consensus was the cost depends on the style of animation and methods of the studio in question. From what I could tell, Invincible's animation is a combination of hand-drawn and digital, which does drive up cost in terms of time and effort. The time factor is more relevant than the effort one, though, as even when Invincible does have characters eating, the amount of detail therein isn't huge.
Steam, crumbs, the nitty-gritty of cooking and eating a meal is absent from the show. Food are generally consistent objects and break off into 2 or more solid pieces without a lot of tiny bits to them.
This suggests to me that the studio is willing to cut corners to reduce cost in the meals department, which means if the meals were not important, they just cut them entirely. Which confirms my understanding of the meals as useful symbolism, but not more important than the plot or the characters. And no one I asked said that having the food present and uneaten would be reasonably less expensive than a character eating it. Under those circumstances, I mean, when the food is just a contiguous piece, I feel like everything should be a little bit cheaper than if it's fully detailed.
I think the most expensive instance of an ordinary meal is actually the Oliver scene. This food is very detailed and viscous, which would take a lot of effort to draw and animate because it needs to constantly change shape. But they were willing to pay that cost to deliver the impact they wanted, rather than have the kid be off-screen with a series of sound effects to represent eating.
Invincible Studio does not see cost as a major obstacle when it comes to giving their meals weight. They will cut costs when they can, but if they're choosing to not have certain characters eat or drink because of cost, then the places where those choices are made have an impact on the story. Because there are other places where the characters do eat and drink, which means the scenes where they don't matter. Because if they're not eating, it's because the team didn't see it as necessary to the story, which says something about the story itself, just like everything else on screen. That's what symbolism is. Meaning derived from small parts of the work, whether intended by the creator or not. Anyway, back to the group.
One step over from lunch, we find the crap food, also known as fast food, but really there's no difference. Like, it all tastes good, but at the end of the day, you're just filling your body up with calories, it leads to diabetes, and wouldn't you know it, most of the experiences in the show associated with it turn out bad. This is the one category that didn't change a whole lot between seasons, though it's a little more plot relevant in season 2. Starting with Mark's meeting Cecil at Burger Mart. There isn't any food present or mentioned in this scene, but they are at a fast food restaurant, so I think it's close enough. The whole argument is basically Mark demanding Cecil treat him like an adult. He wants to do something, be someone, be of use. Which are not exactly trustworthy motivations for someone currently in the throes of grief. Yes, doing something is a good way to move on from grief. Healthy distractions are necessary, but I wouldn't call superheroism healthy for the people who do it. In some cases, sure, saving lives is incredibly fulfilling work and Mark could use some fulfillment right now. But as we see throughout the show, there's a lot more to being a hero than saving people. A lot of it is dirty work, it's harrowing and personally destructive. Mark doesn't need that right now, no matter how much he thinks he does. He proves that to us when he hammers on the table and shouts that he's not his dad, which is a phrase we hear a lot this season.
You're not your dad,
No one thinks
Mark.
you're going to turn out like your father.
I'm saving the world from Omni-Man's
You're not
son.
your father, Mark.
Well, you must get it from my side of the
Be
family.
your father's son.
You're not him.
Cecil does the right thing by Mark by walking away. Until we learn the reason he did it. He really does think that Mark might be just like his father. He refuses to work with the kid at all unless it's with a very short leash. This makes our meal retroactively less adult corrects young person's poor decision and more adult distrusts young person to the point of paranoia. Both Cecil and Mark are in the wrong here, and it'll take the whole season for them to realize that, and by that point the damage will have already been done. Which is fascinating because they're both saying the right things to each other, the lessons they'll both learn. Mark's faster and stronger, but he's not ready, no matter how much he thinks he is. Mark doesn't need Cecil's permission to become a hero, or anything else for that matter. Mark also isn't his dad, no matter how much Cecil fears he might be. Mark needs some real time off, or he's going to do something he'll regret. They're both correct in their word choice, but so very wrong in what they think those words mean and the subtext in which they say them. If I had to pick a favorite scene from this show, this would probably be a close second. In the next episode, after Mark and Cecil start working together and a lot happens, Mark gets sent off to Midnight City to take down our newest edition of Darkwing. Sadly, no. This Darkwing is deranged and delusional, but I wouldn't classify their interaction as a meal. People talking, sure, but there's no food, so why would I even bring it up? Because while Mark's on his way there, he sees a bunch of people at Burger Mart. A community meal, if you will, even if the food is substandard. Cecil's talking to him while he does this, so this is a meal between Mark and Cecil again. Mark catches onto the game quickly here, and Cecil calls him Employee of the Month, fully contradicting what he said in their last meal together. It's nice to see a bit of camaraderie between the two. They're learning to coexist quite effectively. But that coexistence is based on Mark doing exactly what Cecil says to the point that he knows what his boss will say next, and that he doesn't show distaste when said boss brings up his father's crimes. This isn't two people learning to understand each other. This is one person being a good lapdog and doing what his owner asks. And when he finds something that for a moment lets him feel a little bit of joy and wonder, their owner tugs on the leash again and it's back to work. Looping the food in here, Mark stares at this group for a noticeable amount of time, which tells me that he wants to be one of them. He states as much later in the season, but this is foreshadowing that event. Deep down, he wishes he were living a normal life with a normal family, and who can blame him? Which is why, when he learns what Cecil means by Midnight City, he tests it out, goes in and out, plays tourist. It's his last summer being a kid, and he's taking a second to enjoy it. So when Cecil calls him out, it's a denial of that option. You're not a kid anymore, you're an adult, and you will do what I say. The tense interactions continue with crap food when, psych, there's no more. I mean, there's one more, but again, it's too much. There's so much that goes into it, we're not ready yet. So we're moving on to drinks. Hydration is the most important thing for all known life. Food is necessary, but most creatures can last a while with little or even none of it. You can't do that without water or something water adjacent, so in the extremely few scenes where we see something drinkable that's not alcohol, and yes, that does include coffee for this season because it is not a wholly positive drink anymore and that makes me sad, we are discussing something fundamental about human existence, which one would think is the deepest this show gets if they haven't learned their lesson by now. Sorry, that was mean, just show fucks me up, man. Standing alongside the last two meals, we have Mark, Eve, Amber, and William celebrating finally graduating high school over a drink. I know I said no alcohol, just wait. The other three are having their conversation, discussing what they're gonna do with their lives, which preps us for some nice scenes later in the show, including Mark and Amber's lunch in Las Vegas, and Eve's everything we talked about. But then there's Mark, standing, staring off into the distance, his mind completely turned away from it all. He can't drink right now, he's on call, Cecil might need him. For the moment, that's the most important thing in his life, more important than his friends, than Amber. Eve is the one who wakes him up from that, which is foreshadowing, I think. Or at least, I hope. If anyone can pull Mark out of the mindset he's in and is about to engage with, it's Eve. She turns one of the ciders into a virgin Mai Tai, prompting a very funny from Mark before they all toast. She compromises with him, lets him skip the alcohol while still spending time with them. Eve's really good at that, finding a middle ground, seeing the space in which all, or at least most parties can be happy. Maybe not so much in her own life, but certainly in the lives of others. It's something Mark could use a lot of help with, so I really hope he gets it from her. Until then, though, he's stuck having coffee with his mom, who hadn't noticed that he drank coffee until now. Mark even says he started drinking coffee when he got his powers, which means that this scene...
I'll put some coffee on.
...was the start of that. This inherently means coffee is something different to Debbie than it is to Mark. He enjoys it, despite the ties it has to his father, while Debbie seems to have lost the novelty of it. We could stretch the meaning of this to have something to do with their disagreement over Nolan in episode 5, but I think, again, that is stretching. Like, I see the parallels. Mark gets irritated over the cupboard immediately after enjoying the coffee. The same way he loves his dad, but he's still really mad at him. Whereas Debbie is pretty much over the guy, and who can blame her? But again, this is just coffee we're talking about, and I think there's a more concrete meaning to this scene. Especially once we get introduced to this cupboard. Mark tries to close it once, twice, 3 times. Debbie blames Cecil's contractors, Mark defends them. Debbie retaliates, Mark concedes. I'm describing this like a fight because it is one. Mark is firmly on Cecil's side here, where Debbie is firmly opposed. She offers to take a vacation with Mark and he refuses so he can stay on call. This is where we get to the fundamentals. Debbie tries to convince Mark that his life is his own, that he doesn't owe anything to the world or to Cecil. But the fact of the matter is that Mark doesn't get to choose whether he's involved in this. He was involved in Chicago, so he's involved in the rest of the world now too.
Why should you be the only one involved?
But I am involved. We are all involved.
He has a societal obligation to help, but that doesn't mean he needs to help Cecil. The situation is more complex than either of these two seem to get. Debbie wants Mark to take care of himself. That's good. He needs to take care of himself or he's putting the world in the hands of an unstable young man who barely graduated high school. Mark refuses to abandon heroism, which is also good. It's core to the person he is, the way he lives, and the man he wants to become. He should never abandon that. There is a compromise to be found here, but not in just one conversation and not when both of them are still healing. That's why when Cecil calls Mark away to deal with Darkwing, Mark's response is,
"Thank God."
This is too much for him. It's too much from the moment Debbie says those words.
No one thinks you're gonna turn out like your father.
They're the worst words she could have said to him, and this is the only time where Mark actually explains why.
But then why would you even say it?
Everyone wants to tell Mark that he's not Nolan, but they all want to tell him that so much that the statement contradicts itself. If I'm not my dad, then why does everyone keep telling me I'm not? Why is it not just an assumed thing? Whenever someone calls attention to something, they're acknowledging it as an exception, not the status quo. Mark being different from his father is treated like it's unusual, like it needs to be emphasized or it might not be true. This is the fundamental this drink leaves us with. Sometimes you can say something so loudly and so much that it begins to sound like a lie. This is what I love about the non-alcohol drink scenes. They wear what they're about on their sleeves, often saying exactly what they mean. The Virgin Mai Tai was an exception, largely because it also includes alcohol, but the supposed King Mauler being poisoned by his brother while he disses the latter's cooking is incredibly blatant.
Sometimes things are the way they are for a good fucking reason.
The Maulers were never stupid. They chose to make cloning themselves an ambiguous thing because it keeps them on equal footing. To do it any other way would invite infighting and sabotage, and they can't afford that. They're up against the entire world. They need at least one helping hand, and the only person they can really trust is themselves, but only if they know they stand on equal ground. That's a good fucking reason not to change the way things are, and it invites speculation about similar systems in our own lives, like when Donald attempts to resign. Cecil starts the conversation off by refusing, asking if there's something in the water today. You guessed it, no one drinks water this season. This is the only time it's mentioned. And like the purest, most effective form of hydration we have, few meals in the series hit home quite like this one. Donald explains how he can't work for Cecil in good faith when the latter lied to him about what he was and what happened to him, took away his agency in his own life, which is when we learn the truth. We learn that this has happened many times before, that Donald's died over and over again, and each time it was for the good of the people. When next we see him, we learn that he's always made the choice to have his memory erased, that he thought the PTSD would slow him down. Things are the way they are for a good reason. Donald always had agency in what happened to him. He even backs up those decisions by making the same choice again after learning the truth. The reality of the world and what he's gone through is just too much to bear. Which leads us to Mark and Amber. I'm still not ready to talk about this. I don't think I'll ever be ready, but we need to talk about it. This can't remain unsaid. It's too important. Mark and Amber are the best written relationship and breakup I have seen in fiction. Because said breakup tears me apart with how real and tragic it is. Amber is left on the sidelines for most of the season while bigger things than her constantly drag Mark away. By the time they have a second to reconnect, they've been apart so long, it's like their relationship is just starting up again. Remember how I said drinks are blatant? Look at the latte foam art. It's 2 broken hearts. To the artist who decided to put that in, I expect an apology in the mail because this is a personal assault. They talk about how this feels like a first date, that they don't know what to do with their relationship. They both want it to continue, they care for each other and want to be part of each other's lives, and neither of them wants the other's life to be endangered or hindered by this relationship. Mark reveals that he sometimes wishes he never got powers so he could have a normal life with Amber. Amber, and I want to stress this, after being lied to before about Mark having those powers and what he was using them for, directly tells him that he has an obligation to help people because he has powers. And if he didn't feel that way, they wouldn't be dating at all. Mark's desire to help those in need is what Amber loves about him the most. It's what got her interested in him in the first place. He helped her before he ever got powers. That took guts. But she also hates lying to cover for him, and she hates not having anyone to talk to about this. Mark also needs someone to talk to, someone who can understand. So they both look for help elsewhere, from the wisest people they know. Mark goes to Art because he's the closest thing to a male role model he still has, and Amber goes to Eve because she's the only friend the couple has that feels just as close to both of them. Eve hands Amber a glass of juice, another unique addition, and we get the zenith of their relationship. We get the full truth, the problem each of them is facing.
I feel like I'm failing Amber.
And moments after that, we get the obvious question, the next step.
Why are you here talking to me when you should be talking to him?
Mark and Amber want to believe there's an easy solution, that there's something they haven't tried, or some puzzle piece they're missing that they can find and use to bring back what they had. And all of that is theoretically possible. This isn't not an Airbender problem, but it's definitely not just that. Rather than wasting time looking for an outside solution, they need to be spending time building that solution together. No amount of advice will do that for them. They just have to face it head on. So they do. More specifically, Mark does. An act of goodwill sparks another. He helps Rex, so Rex helps him. The Guardians will cover for Mark 2 nights a week, and Mark will spend those nights living an ordinary life with the woman he loves. She remarks how that's unethical, but if we try to live ethically every moment of our lives, we're going to run ourselves ragged. These people want to help the world, and each of them can in their own way, but they need to help themselves and each other first. It's the only way to maintain some level of normalcy, the only way to maintain their sanity. This is the solution, the make or break moment of their relationship. Compromise, made by Mark for Amber this time. It's such a heartwarming scene that includes crap food and dessert, like their second and makeup dates in season 1, and it even has the real dinner they never got to have back then. It's starting to feel like things might actually be okay.
Invincible. Come with me now, or this woman dies.
This left me in tears. The rest did too, but this moment specifically made me step away when I first watched it. Mark and Amber fought to be together. They struggled, they reasoned, they looked for answers, and they found one. One that the entire world was okay with and willing to work with them to make happen. But the universe didn't get the memo. Fate itself had other plans, tore them apart, almost literally. If Mark played that situation one step differently, then Amber would be dead. The plot happens. It's not a meal. I don't care. Mark returning to Amber afterwards is not a meal either, but I also don't care. There is and has been so much hate thrown in Amber's face, it disgusts me. I don't understand how some people can't see how well-written and thought-provoking she has always been. Are we even watching the same show? This conversation is the most true-to-life piece I've seen in any animation. Mark's saving lives every time he leaves Amber feeling lonely. She doesn't feel like she has the right to be hurt by that. But I have gone through multiple courses of therapy by this point, and every therapist and psychiatrist I've ever spoken with, no matter their specialization, has said the same thing on this subject. All feelings are valid. No matter who holds them, no matter what they're about, the reactions to those feelings can be wrong, but the feeling itself has a reason to be there. It is there to help you. Amber feeling hurt by Mark leaving her, regardless of what Mark is doing, is valid. Any child of an emergency worker who has abandonment issues can tell you that. That doesn't make it Mark's fault. He doesn't want to leave Amber lonely, but he doesn't have a choice. If he picks a night off with her over other people, hundreds or maybe even thousands of people could die. Amber knows that, and she doesn't blame him for it, not anymore. She saw the fight between him and his father. She knows that he didn't intentionally try to hurt her by lying about this. Her forgiving him is natural after that, and so is her recognition that this is a deal she needs to accept. If she's going to date Mark, she needs to recognize that she's going to be lonely for a lot of it, and she doesn't blame him for that. But it's still why they don't work. Mark and Amber don't work as a couple. They want to. They desperately want to, but each time something like this happens, Amber is left alone and afraid, and Mark is left alone and guilty, both of them for things they can't control. Fear and concern, doubt and uncertainty, unfamiliar conversations and constant danger, and guilt on both sides for things neither person has control over. No relationship deserves this. No person deserves this. They love each other, but they hurt each other just by living the lives they believe in and feel they must. which could be fixed if there wasn't genuine reason for them to feel that way. Mark has abilities no one else has, which means he has a responsibility to use those abilities to help people. To do anything else would be selfish in the extreme and would invite too much personal guilt for anyone to live with. But him doing so invites too much personal guilt for Amber to live with. In the end, what tears them apart isn't a lie or a lack of agency. It's the fact that Amber is a weapon to be used against Mark. She can handle loneliness, even if she complains about it. She can handle lying to her friends. She can bear the societal pressure of having a boyfriend who's never around. She can't handle hurting Mark. She shouldn't have to. She doesn't have to. Mark doesn't want her to go through that. And Amber doesn't want Mark to go through the pain of leaving her lonely every time he saves people. He deserves better than that. They deserve each other, but not the problems that come with being with each other. This is reality, crashing down on a wonderful and impossible dream. I've been on both sides of this situation, and they are equally torturous. I'm certain every one of you will experience or possibly has experienced something like this before, and if you haven't, you can only understand it when you do. Someone told me in the comment section of the first food video that I don't have the right to talk about alcohol when I've never had any, that it's something you have to live to understand. I don't believe that's true, but I do believe that for this. So I hope that those of you who hate Amber keep doing it for as long as you can. Because it means you've never gone through this. And this is a pain I wouldn't wish on anyone. And after that sobering discussion, I think alcohol is a great step forward. Not a fun one, but we've already drunk the poison, we might as well lick the bowl. Much of Invincible's alcohol in Season 2 centers around Debbie, just like Season 1. There's a lot less of it in Season 2, though. Only 6 instances in the entire season compared to Season 1's, 12? That's a significant difference, and would normally imply things get less depressing in Season 2, which we know isn't true. Instead, what this means is the few times alcohol does emerge in the show are that much more significant. In the first episode, Olga visits Debbie, makes her dinner, and has a glass of wine with her, all to give her support after what happened with Nolan a month ago. This is a very detailed scene with a lot more than just alcohol to it, so let's start from the beginning. Olga lets herself in through the back door, surprising Debbie with a kitchen knife in her hand, and asks if Debbie likes stroganoff. Few things here. 1, the back door was open? No one was home. That's a serious amount of trust the Graysons place in their neighborhood. That may not sound like much. They live in suburbia, and this neighborhood seems pretty crime low, or at least is intended to. But it's actually good foreshadowing for the last episode. Debbie's not prepared for a home invasion, and we'll see how badly that turns out for her. 2, not at all surprised that Debbie's shocked to see a person with a knife in her kitchen, but finding out it's Olga doesn't seem to relieve her that much at first. It's possible this is more foreshadowing? Maybe she's got reservations about the family members of the old Guardians of the Globe, and if she does, she's right to. Again, I think that one's stretching, but I want to be as thorough as possible here. 3rd, the food is proposed and we see evidence that they ate it together. The connection's here and it's strong, but Debbie doesn't touch her wine. As we covered in the first video, wine is Debbie's go-to coping mechanism, so it's telling that she doesn't take a single sip from the glass Olga sets down for her. Olga drinks the wine, a healthy amount of it actually. She's got no problem demonstrating all of who she is to Debbie. Debbie is not willing to open up that way. She's too scared to show the way she copes to someone else. She's gone from being open about it to the point where she can't even notice it becoming a problem, to knowing it's a problem so much that she's not ready to let anyone help her with it. It's nice to have Olga here, it's good that she can talk to someone about this, but Debbie still doesn't trust her, not so far as to share a drink in any case. This isn't an attack on Debbie's character, this is normal. She trusted one man for 20 years, let him in much farther than a simple drink, and look what that did to her. It's really hard to open up to people after trauma like that, even people you already know you can trust, which is why it takes a long time for her to give the card Olga gives her a shot. What's really rough about this is Mark is one of the only people Debbie might be willing to open up to, but he's not willing to let her. He comes home and goes straight to his room, saying he already ate, having his own problems and priorities. Debbie obviously wants to help with those too, but it's like Olga says.
You can't help him until you help yourself.
The next time we see Debbie drinking, she's alone, a wine glass next to her that's been tipped over while she's passed out over her laptop again. Mark comes home and wakes her up just after fighting the Maulers. A concerned look and explanation later, Debbie's realizing what she did and picking up the wine glass. Until recently, Debbie was the one balancing Mark, keeping him stable and giving him proper direction in life. Now, it's Mark's turn to do that for her. He doesn't judge her for drinking. He doesn't give the tipped glass a second look, even though Debbie's clearly insecure about it. He just walks over to the cupboard, gets some plates, and insists on making dinner. Debbie only questions it a little bit before saying that would be nice and handing him some good news. I wasn't expecting a heartwarming portrayal of alcoholism in this show, but it's honestly welcome. Speaking as someone related to many people who have been addicts in the past, placing judgment on someone over how they use a substance never helps anything. It just exacerbates the problem, and it's a testament to how kind a person Mark is that he either knows that inherently or, more likely, doesn't even consider judging his mom. He knows he can help, he wants to help, so he's going to help. Mark saves lives every day, and even when he's home, he's still one hell of a hero. Something similar happens in the second episode. The broken cupboard established earlier on with the coffee argument rears its head again while Debbie's setting up for a glass of wine, and Debbie fucking loses it. Slams the cupboard over and over, cursing it, breaks a ton of glasses and plates and the cupboard itself before falling to her knees, sobbing. It's about time we talk about this cupboard. This wooden board on hinges is a constant reminder of the trauma Debbie and her son experienced. Their house will metaphorically and literally never be the same because of what happened to it. The building itself has trauma it will never recover from, no matter how many times it gets rebuilt. No matter how much Debbie drinks, she doesn't have anyone she's willing to talk to about this. There are people in her life that want to help, that wish she would talk to them, but she feels like she can't. And the more she buries her emotions, the more desperate and painful and destructive they become. Her life and mind are being consumed by the amount of both she wasted on a relationship that turned out to be a lie. Which is when Mark comes home and sees what's happened. He just went through a harrowing experience too, but he saved people. He proved to himself that he's not Nolan, reaffirmed his own identity by disobeying Cecil. He's coming home from a difficult but fulfilling day, so he's in a good position to comfort his mother. But she pushes him away, like she's been pushing everyone away. Mark is the result of Debbie and Nolan's relationship. What if his love turns out to be a lie? Even if it's not, what kind of mother lets her son see her like this? Comfort her when she's supposed to be the one looking out for him. She's his only parental figure now. The amount of responsibility she must feel for him, and the guilt of adding more weight to the immeasurable amount her son already has on his shoulders, she can't handle it. She shouldn't need to handle it. But she only pushes him back for so long, because she can't handle being alone either. This moment where Debbie lets Mark help, lets him hold her and comfort her, is the moment when she accepts that she can't do this alone anymore. She accepts that Mark is an adult now, that he's making his own decisions, and he's learning how much those decisions impact the people around him and the world itself. He's able to help so many people, so of course he's able to help her too. There is no shame in accepting the help of someone who can freely give it, no matter your connection to them. I don't think Debbie's lost the shame yet by the time this scene is over. But it's a tremendous step in the right direction. Staying on Debbie, because seriously, a lot of this season's alcohol is in her scenes and bloodstream, she takes another important step by going to a support group for the things she's experienced. She gets some coffee that I forgot to mention until now, and has a nice and friendly conversation with the person running the support group, Carol. They've already spoken over the phone, but it's always nice to meet face to face. Carol makes it clear that Debbie doesn't have to share if she's not comfortable. But it's the reason they all show up, so best to make the most of their time. She also mentions that the coffee tastes like battery acid. Huh. Maybe it's just one of those bonding jokes? I don't really know how to read this one yet. Let's move on. As Debbie's leaving and going to her car, she gets interrupted by one of the guys from the support group, Theo, smoking a cigarette. After the first season's only portrayal of smoking, it's not the most encouraging thing in the world. But maybe they're turning a new leaf with this season. The alcohol in season 2 has been soft and warm so far, who knows how much else has changed. Theo invites Debbie out to drink at a bar that some of the folks from the support group like to spend time at. This alone is not a problem, but when they actually go to this bar and Theo starts telling Debbie who his wife was, that is a problem and a very serious one. Support groups are, above all else, confidential. What's said in them stays in them, and for Theo to share personal details about his life to someone who just joined the same support group outside of the designated safe space for sharing strikes me as a little unethical. He doesn't know Debbie, and she just got here. She deserves time and space to adjust and read the room. The confidentiality clause is not there just to protect the person sharing, it's also there to protect others from feeling pressured to share. Yes, Theo expresses that he's not trying to pressure her, but in a space like this, the superhero spouse's support group, telling details outside the room about who exactly your spouse was and what they did is its own kind of pressure. Not every hero stays a hero. I doubt that Omni-Man was the first fallen hero this Earth has ever seen. Even if they do, many heroes cheat on their partners, Rexplode and Duplicate being prime examples. This support group is necessary for anyone embroiled in the life of superheroism who is not a hero themselves. But like superheroism, it can be destructive if not done carefully. There's a reason Carol tells Debbie to only use first names, why she gives everyone a break the moment Debbie steps into the room. She's well aware of how easy it is to make enemies here, and she's trying to head that off at the pass. She wants Debbie to get the most out of her time here, which requires deft and slightly deceptive handling of the situation. Which is why the coffee tastes like battery acid. It was the drink meant to allow for positive connection in our first season. Now it's become corrupted, tainted, and unwelcome. This is a place to voice the things you feel you can't say, not a place to make connections recklessly. If you make friends here, great, but don't try to make it happen, that'll just make things worse. That's what Theo does. He unintentionally pressures Debbie into telling him who her spouse is, and once she does, he throws it back in her face. If you disagree with my first point, that's fine. I can see a lot of alternative takes that are equally valid, but there is no excuse for the way he treats her here. All feelings are valid. It's the way they're used that sometimes isn't. He's allowed to be angry, but he's not allowed to direct his anger at the people who had nothing to do with it. Debbie didn't kill the Green Ghost. She just married the man who did without knowing what he was capable of. Even if she had known, she couldn't have stopped him. No one could have stopped him. The GOG might have had a chance if they hadn't been caught off guard, but that's all it would have been. A chance. And to get it, Debbie would have had to somehow guess that her husband wasn't entirely altruistic and had ulterior motives for being on Earth after seeing him save countless lives. She doesn't owe Theo an explanation or pity. She's grieving too. Knowing the person you loved wasn't who you thought they were is one of the deepest cuts a person can get. Yes, deeper than if they had died. Because when a person dies, they die as who they are, and you can remember them for the good parts of that person. When they turn out to have been different from who you thought they were, in such a way as to be deemed ethically compromised in your eyes, you can never remember them the same way again. How much of the kindness they showed you was real, and how much of it was a lie? How much of what they said was true, and which of the important things they told you weren't? Where do the lies end, and the pieces of the person you thought you knew begin? Everyone has to build their own answers to these questions when something like this happens. That process is beyond painful. Everyone dies, so everyone experiences loss. But not everyone experiences loss like this. Theo has the right to be upset and hurt and mad, but he doesn't have the right to take that out on Debbie. Yet he does it anyway, tells her not to come back to the group, that it wouldn't be safe with her there. The truth is, the group was never safe. Because of him. Our last class with Debbie comes in episode 5, when Mark returns with a child that will soon be named Oliver. Debbie struggles to take it all in, to understand the situation. She's angry and confused and has every right to be all of those things. They talk about letting the GDA take care of him, but Mark dismisses it. Oliver's his little brother. He can't just abandon him to someone he doesn't really know he can trust. He even considers taking a break from college to take care of him, but Debbie doesn't let him. She offers to take Oliver in until they can figure something out. The alcohol's presence in this scene is a threat. Debbie doesn't drink it, but the few times we've seen her with it on screen didn't turn out well for her. When she goes off about Nolan and the lives he destroys, we can see the bottle in the glass and worry that she might lose it again, that she might break down. So that when she doesn't, when she agrees with Mark that they need to figure out a way to take care of Oliver, we can be relieved and happy for them. This is definitive proof of something I've thought about Season 2's alcohol for a while. In Season 1, alcohol was depressing, hinting at a problem through the presence of a coping mechanism. But in Season 2, it's a catalyst for change. Positive change. Personal growth. The teens drink to celebrate their graduation. Eve's dad has a drink in his hand while he's watching TV, and she walks past him. Yeah, their relationship may never be good, but they're living in the same house again. That says something. Plus, we see that right before Rex helps her get back to emotional stability. I still don't think that's a meal, but it takes place right after one. And of the 4 times we see Debbie with a drink, something good is happening amidst the sadness. Olga's proving to her that they're still friends. Mark is proving to her that he cares and that he's there for her. The only time it goes sour involves her pouring her heart out to someone she just met. She could have gone through the positives without the negatives, potentially, but I don't see that growth happening as quickly, because it's in our hardest, darkest moments that we grow the most. Amber drinks alone in one of the episodes preceding her last dinner with Mark, feeling isolated by the deception she's employed. This pain is part of what will lead her to recognize that they don't work as a couple and she needs to find her own way. So much of the pain that joins the scenes with alcohol involved is unbearable, but these characters do bear it. They get through it because no matter how bad a feeling is, it's still just that, a feeling. And barring chronic illness or chemical brain balance inconsistencies, a feeling will always pass. No matter what happens, we move on from it, we get through it, and we grow as a result. That's the purpose of alcohol in Invincible, and no one knows it better than Rick. In episode 6, William shows Rick around the school again. They find the fountain that commemorates Sinclair's victims, and William immediately tries to divert to the waffle maker in the cafeteria. Here it is, only direct mention of breakfast in the entire season. In this case, I think it's supposed to be a wake-up call for Rick. He went through something traumatic, and reminding him of it this early on is not a good idea. He needs to focus on other things right now, remind himself that he does have a life to live, and not all of it is horrific. The wake-up call theory is supported by Rick talking about his dreams.
But it's like I'm watching someone else's nightmare.
It's a little hard for me to grasp what he's talking about, but I'd love to hear in the comments how that makes those of you suffering from PTSD feel. I know it's different for everyone, a lot of illnesses are, and this is one of the ones I feel underqualified to talk about, so I think that angle's better saved for all of you. From the perspective of one who does not relate to Rick, the way he talks about what happened to him is still heartbreaking, and it actually helps me empathize with William at the same time as I do so with Rick. I don't know how to help this man, but I want to, and I'm not even romantically interested in him. So imagining how William must feel when he loves this man is heartbreaking. William wants to bring Rick back to the present, to reality, but Rick's already been to reality. A reality he doesn't think anyone could understand or he will ever be able to leave behind. Which is why he's getting ready to kill himself in the next episode, why Donald gets called away from scheduling his own amnestic procedure. This scene contains something I can relate to, as Donald hears Rick talk about his troubles and shows him that neither of them are alone in what they've gone through. This scene directly follows the one we covered earlier, where Cecil mentions water and Donald finds out the truth about his body and memories. He received clarity on his situation and was getting ready to have that clarity removed yet again after experiencing the trauma that lies in knowing snippets of the truth. But I'm gonna hazard a guess that recovery from PTSD takes a lot more than just clarity. The decision to erase Donald's memories would be a decision to give up on progressing through his trauma, and I'm not shaming any of the previous Donalds that did that. Our brains repress memories for a reason, the same way they feel for a reason. Anything that happens inside your head is valid just by being there. But giving up is something that should wait for when you've tried your hardest, tried everything you can think of, and Donald hasn't yet. The way Cecil talks about it, Donald's decision seems to have always been made either as soon as he got put into his new body, or as soon as he learned the truth every single time. A person in the throes of trauma cannot be relied upon to make a wise decision in regard to their own health. Anyone would want to forget something like being squashed by a kaiju or having their spine shattered before they blew themselves up, when they're actively experiencing the emotional trauma of that event. I want to be clear that I'm not suggesting Donald needs to calm down before he makes a big decision like this. That's not how any mental illness works. What I am saying is Donald hasn't been fair to himself by not giving himself the chance to grapple with his trauma. Rather than think about the fact that he was killed in the line of duty, he chose to think about the fact that his memories were erased, which is understandable. But when he finds out that he's died that way 39 times and chose to erase his own memories, overthinking about that, rather than take the time to contemplate his next decision, he goes with his gut. which we now know is a decision he would have regretted if he stuck with it. Because in the process of talking Rick down, revealing who he is and what he's gone through, Donald recognizes that what Rick is doing here isn't that different from what he was about to do. Turning away from the person he is and the things he's done. Yes, he's gone through hell without ever staying dead. But every time it happened, he made sure others could live. Donald died 39 times to save the lives of multiple others. Hundreds, possibly thousands of people still live because Donald was rebuilt again and again. Our memories, our experiences detail a vast amount of who we are as people, no matter how tragic they are or how difficult they are to process. Which still doesn't account for the fact that Donald chose to save lives at the expense of his own, to do everything he could to protect the innocent and make this world a better place. There is no greater hero in Invincible than Donald, because there is no greater act of heroism than saving a life of a stranger cautiously and intelligently while still being willing to risk your life for theirs. The words he speaks to help Rick in this situation show just how good a person Donald truly is. There are some people in this world who find the most fulfillment in helping others, to the point where the easiest way to get them to help themselves is by making it the only way to help someone else. Rick demonstrates just as much strength as Donald in this scene, both for being willing to let out his emotions and talk about what he's gone through, whether or not anyone around him can understand, and for being willing to listen and give others the chance to try to understand. The clarity Donald received is incomplete without Rick's expressions of his emotional trauma. Without seeing what he's doing from the outside, Donald has a lesser perspective of the way his life is trending. Rick gives him that perspective by motivating Donald to give aid to him. It's beautiful. It's my favorite scene in the show. It makes me cry every time I watch it. Not just because I'm watching a hero save someone's life and help them find meaning in it, but because I'm also watching that hero find meaning in saving that life and being saved by that meaning. It's like a wound that's being cleansed and redressed. Maybe it'll never fully heal, but it's clear that it's getting better. There's evident signs of growth and repair, and it gives us hope for a better future. That's what alcohol is in Season 2 of Invincible. It's medicine. Medicine is unpleasant. It's difficult. A lot of procedures surrounding it are painful and can disrupt your life, but it is healing. The catharsis that comes from these scenes is leading somewhere. It's encouraging something, and I think that's beautiful. Unfortunately, we're nearing the end of our examples. We've run out of alcohol, pretty much every drink, actually. We had breakfast, we had lunch. It's probably best for us to move on to dinner. Some of these meals are less important than others. Paul asking Debbie out is more or less telegraphing that we'll get to see an attempt at dating for her next season. Which is great, but there's not a lot of symbolism there that differs from what I've already covered. The guy's kinda awkward, but in a well-meaning sort of way. I don't know, he's got potential, we'll see what happens. Let's see. Most of the other dinners got covered during the alcohol and Eve sections. There's not a lot left to... Oh, shit. Alright. Let's talk about Alan and Telia. So in the episode where we get introduced to the Coalition of Planets, Alan and his girlfriend, respected General Telia, do the sex thing and have dinner in a space station. Alan pigs out on worms. Telia's dinner also pigs out on worms, which is weird. I'm sorry, this one's just weird. Like, is this meant to be innuendo? Alan eats the worms, Brainboy eats the worms, Telia's eating Brainboy, so I guess the joke is she's eating Alan? Bit of a reach, considering we just got proof of that one. Maybe something in their conversation will help. Let's see. She's staring at her planet, he says a corny line, she laughs at the corny line, they share a romantic moment, and then she asks him what Thetis wanted to talk about after the council meeting. A conversation she was explicitly not allowed in. Alan says he's not allowed to say, which clearly upsets her, and he's talking about finding a mole when the fucking Viltrumites show up! Oh my god, Telia's the fucking mole! Okay, there's probably a lot of people for whom this is obvious as hell, but my analysis brain has been focused on picking out the symbolic meaning of juice to the point of a mental breakdown. We're focusing on food still, staying in my wheelhouse. Telia's definitely eating Alan, and not in a sexy way. Well, yes, in a sexy way, but more than that. She's sucking information out of him. God damn it, stop giggling! Telia is in the perfect position to, shut up, collect information for the Viltrumite Empire. She's a general, so she gets to listen in on council meetings, and likely has a direct line to Viltrum itself. She's the girlfriend of the Coalition's strongest warrior, and she just convinced that man to share a secret handed to him from the leader of their organization. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But this is all pretty damning, at least to me. We also don't know how much she's been told by the Viltrumites. If she is a spy, then she likely didn't know Viltrumite soldiers were dispatched to her location. She seems a bit too horrified for that, unless she's a really good actor. If she is, though, then I do worry that if Thetis hadn't shown up when he did, Telia would be the one to pull the plug on Alan. It would have worked out either way, but, you know. Alright, that happened. We only have a few more meals to cover, and only one of them is what you're thinking of. We all know how the pizza scene goes. It was half the reason you guys wanted this video. I won't lie, I started to wonder after I uploaded the first video if I wasn't stretching it a little with what pizza actually means. Yeah, a terrible thing happened because of it, but that's one of 3 instances. But I'd already written, recorded, and done most of the editing before that thought hit me, and I figured it'd be better to finish it and be wrong than never finish it at all because I kept correcting myself. So, to be clear, I retroactively disagree with my thoughts in the first video, on pizza specifically. Yes, it can lead to catastrophic disasters, but it doesn't have to. I think pizza is less a harbinger of doom and more a symbol for a lack of awareness. Nolan talks about pizza just after getting back from the funeral because he's not fully aware of what it means to his family, or he's choosing not to be aware. Rick hasn't known Mark and Amber long enough to understand how serious this fight is. He's completely out of the loop and not maintaining careful awareness when walking around the city streets at night. Not trying to victim blame, he had no reason to think any of this shit would happen to him, but it's also a good example of why even big strong men need to be careful after dark. Mark threatens to display the same lack of awareness for his mother, but stops short of it, demonstrating his development as a character and growth to adulthood. And Rexplode is so determined to be caught unawares, he convinces Duplicate and Shrinking Ray to follow his example. Then the 3 of them go charging into a fight they assume they'll win just because they're up against the Lizard League. They go right in without any forethought or preparation and get slaughtered. They're extremely lucky I'm not using the L word here. Because they're outnumbered and outclassed, Duplicate's last remaining clones, as far as the Guardians are aware, we'll get to it, are brutally murdered, which sends Ray over the deep end and has her giving a guy a brain hemorrhage, which honestly would have been a much better opener. Picture this as an alternate fight, right? So first we have Duplicate. I don't think she can infinitely make clones, but she can at least make a lot of them. So have her pick up the guns left behind by the dead soldiers lying around and open fire the minute the doors open, preferably with Ray diving into someone's ear to use them as a meat shield against the bullets. Bonus points if she manages to get into the big guy's ears at the start. He's clearly got the most meat on his bones, he can probably take a few bullet wounds, but no one survives a severed brainstem. The bullets are probably going to wind up being a distraction for the most part, which is where Rex comes in. Whoever dove behind cover, blow that cover up. Whoever can stand a stream of bullets cannot stand a barrel full of charges. This team was fully equipped to take down this group of bad guys, but because they went in with no real plan, Duplicate becomes an edgelord's art piece, and Shrinking Ray becomes the next meal we talk about! Yeah, that's right, assholes. You thought pizza was gonna be the worst thing we talked about today? No, we're diving a bit deeper than that. Fuck Subway. This is horrifying. When I first watched this scene, I was bawling and ready to throw up. When I realized that her going into his mouth counts as a meal, I had to go for a walk and get Little Caesars to calm down. And I don't know what it says about me that pizza was the comfort food I needed that day! Do you know what this means? This means the entirety of Invincible gets a fucking cannibalism category! If I am somehow able to monetize this video with full revenue, I'm going to be shocked. Just so we're clear, I'm counting the Big C as anything that involves one sentient being eating another. You could argue for Brain Boy, but I don't think there's a single thought going through that head with arms. So let's talk about my favorite character being crushed inside a man's stomach. Oh my god. I'm gonna sound a little cruel in this category, I promise it's just a way to detach myself so I don't go fucking insane. This meal's purpose is equal parts tragedy and teaching tool. Ray let her anger get the best of her, which got her nabbed by Loc Logan and sent on a path to his acid pit. Rex calls him an idiot and says that she doesn't stay small, and in this moment, we in the audience are getting ready to watch a big muscle man explode from the inside. Which is when we're reminded that those muscles aren't just in his arms and legs, they're in his abs too. Ray is left to fight for her life as she grows to full size, only to be crushed by the steel wall that is this man's body.
Yeah.
I have never wanted someone dead more in my life. Rex starts freaking out, and in freaking out, he manages to single-handedly, pun absolutely fucking intended, you earned this prick, take down the rest of the Lizard League minus one asshole. The rest isn't a meal. It's just Rex getting shot in the head and beating King Lizard to a pulp, which is where I stop raking him over the coals. Yes, his negligent ass got two of the best women in the show brutally mangled, but he learns his lesson. The Lizard League's greatest leaders are all done for, multiple cities are saved, and Rex is on the way towards redemption. Something good did come out of this, as weird as that sounds, and thankfully none of the good guys are actually dead. Whether Ray recovers or not is yet to be seen, but Duplicate's reserve clone finds the Immortal after the latter takes an extended leave. He's bringing some fish he caught back to his cabin, which reminds me of the time Eve makes food for her parents. Both of these are instances of bringing home the bacon, a person demonstrating competence in caregiving, showing that they can provide for the people they love. Immortal thinks he's only providing for himself, but he doesn't shy away from letting Kate into his life again. It doesn't matter that she didn't tell him she was still alive, or that she was thinking of leaving her life of heroism. He understands all of that. He's been through what she has, and he knows better than to judge a good thing. She's alive. That's all he needs. And I wish we could end there. But we can't. There's one last meal we need to talk about, and it's more of a three-parter, really. We need to talk about Mark versus Angstrom. Yes, this is a meal. Angstrom doesn't eat any food, but he does subject Mark to the threat of being eaten. These dinosaurs, they turn this into a meal. The other two things I'll focus on are a little more dubious, but this is not. They directly talk about eating Mark. That's sentient creatures planning to eat another sentient creature. That's Big C. There are plenty of videos about this fight that take it apart better than I could. I'll try to remember to leave links to those in the description. I've also been told this dino thing is leading to something that happens in the comics, so potential spoilers for Season 3 whenever it comes out. Mark goes through one of Angstrom's portals only to emerge on an Earth where, presumably, the dinosaurs never died off and instead became the primary civilization on Earth. They refer to Mark as a sapien, which suggests very different words and definitions in their version of the English language, and all seem pretty cool with eating him despite the fact that he's part of an endangered species, or potentially an extinct one. The moment he talks, though, one of them has a change of heart.
Back, you brute! If it talks, it thinks.
This dino's his own kind of civilized, though he seems to be outnumbered. Mark flies away, manages to escape, and goes into another portal. Fast forward a bit, and he goes through another portal to end up in Zombieland. This is questionable. The Zeds only say one word, and that's meat, but the dino from before said that if it speaks, it thinks, so I think we can make a case for Big C. Once again, Mark is on the receiving end of it, which is good. I mean, better than the alternative. But there's something about him being eaten away that speaks to what he's going through here. Mark winds up going through many portals. Many portals. He doesn't know how much time has passed since he left, whether his mom and brother are okay. These are the things he relates around a campfire to people who are basically strangers. Maybe he got to know them better than we did, but there's actually no food present here. I'm calling this a meal because usually when you sit around a campfire to talk, you take the opportunity to make a snack, but that's just conjecture. No eating is done, so no connection is made. He's speaking to the ether, talking about how harrowing and terrifying all of this is, how desperate he is to protect his family. A desperation we know is going to devour the person he is and leave behind someone he barely recognizes. Throughout these meals, Angstrom Levy is eating away at Mark's goodwill, trying to prove to himself that Invincible is always a monster, that he is always a good person, no matter how vile and terrible the things he does are. And in so doing, he brings about his own demise. Mark kills Angstrom. Nothing will change that. But Angstrom also kills himself. Unknowingly, using Mark as the tool for his suicide. Which rolls right back around to the start of all this, with an alternate Mark saying the people of Earth destroyed their own cities by fighting back. But there's a difference, an important one. Those people were protecting their freedom. Angstrom was protecting his assumptions. Humanity didn't start the fight with Viltrum. Angstrom sure as shit started the fight with Mark. As horrible as this meal is, I think it's one Mark needs to have. He couldn't fight the Viltrumites his way without getting himself and his father seriously injured, condemning the latter to execution. None of the Guardians of the Globe seem to be nearly as against killing as Mark is. None of them will judge him for this. No one he knows will judge him for this. The one person who is judging Mark right now is Mark. It's good to have morals. It's good to set boundaries for yourself and for others, but when those boundaries are crossed, you have to make a choice. When others cross them, you can choose to cut ties, but you can't cut ties with yourself. You can either hold yourself accountable or forgive yourself and try again. This isn't really the choice in this matter, though. Mark can only hold himself accountable for so long before he breaks under the expectations he has for himself. He'll have to forgive himself eventually. The choice is how much he has to do to earn that forgiveness, because that will determine how okay with killing he is, under what circumstances he's alright with it, the situations that would allow for it. Through hard work, personal change, learning to master himself so he never loses control like that again. These are the ways that he finds his way back to being a hero, one that can actually stand against Viltrum. Somewhere along the way, I hope he realizes that killing someone who was threatening the lives of his family wasn't really the problem. The problem was that he did it on impulse, rather than resolving himself and making that choice. I expect Mark to overcorrect in Season 3. He's probably going to get beaten up a lot more for holding back, and then he might overcorrect in the opposite direction. But that's life. That's why the food is here in the first place. To show us that these people are human. We feel for these people because we see them as people. We see them stagger and waver. We see them grimace and struggle. We see them betray and get betrayed and lie and cheat and bond and grow and love and live and eat. That's humanity's greatest strength. The thing that warms Nolan's heart. The thing that makes us invincible.
And that'll wrap us up. Thank you so much for watching. Huge thanks to Eliath Goliath and Carson for being my first 2 patrons of the channel. Both of these mad lads are giving me $10 donations. It's so amazing to see the support I've been getting. You guys are the biggest reasons I'm doing this right now. Thank you. If you want to be a big reason for why I do this, go ahead and hit up the Patreon link down in the description below. If you like this video, feel free to leave a like. If you have something to say about it, go ahead and leave a comment. Lastly, if you're seeing this video and you haven't seen some of my other stuff, feel free to check that out. If you want to subscribe for more, there's a button for that too. Make sure to ring that bell so you're actually notified when I post things. If you're watching this right after it's uploaded, I should still be streaming on Twitch. There's a link for that in the description below as well. I'll be streaming Across the Obelisk with my good friend Timely, and hopefully another good friend soon to be, Sage. And if you want to see me rant about snails and politics, you can follow my Twitter as well. And that should about do it. Again, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day. Take it easy, and I'll see y'all later. Peace.